Okay, hi, my name is Emily Vogel, and I am here to talk to you about hosting. So, quick question, what is hosting? Um, Essentially, there are many different ways you can host, but the most simplest way to describe hosting is whenever you're developing something on your local computer, like a Java application or a simple HTML file or something like that, and you click on it and you're running it or whatever, you're running it on something called your local host, which is your local computer. Um, Now, technically, if you had a computer that you owned and bought and whatever, and you were running your own code on it, you could actually set it up so that the entire internet can kind of access that computer and see your code. Um, there are many people, in case you want more of a hardware application for this, there's a lot of people who will buy Raspberry Pis, which are like mini computers that are around 30 bucks, I think now, are there more expensive ones, where you can set up your own hosting machines. So you can take all that code that you write, put it to the Raspberry Pi, and it'll run whatever you write for the whole internet to see. But That's just one kind of hosting. That's more of a manual kind of hosting. What we're seeing more now with personal projects and different like private companies and stuff, we are seeing more of cloud hosting. And one thing that you might hear a lot about is cloud computing or cloud solutions. And that's kind of what essentially cloud hosting is. Um, Basically, anything that's related to cloud, there's probably a tool, like a very specific tool that you can use to fulfill a certain task. Like if you're doing machine learning, you should probably do it in a cloud provider and not on your local machine. If you are hosting a website, you probably shouldn't be hosting on a Raspberry Pi, even though it would be a good experience to get that hardware aspect on it. You'd probably end up more often than not using a cloud host, like cloud hosting provider. Um, Now, I've also broken down hosting into two different categories, this cloud hosting. There's manual hosting and Docker hosting. The first one is manual hosting, is actually what we're going to be kind of covering. I don't think this is the actual term. This is just what I'm calling it. Manual hosting is when you deploy all of your code files manually to some sort of hosting machine, whether that's a cloud-based or anything else on a physical machine somewhere in a workplace. Some people actually do that. I've worked for companies like that. Um, that's known as manual hosting. And I listed a couple of cloud solutions that are 100%, well, sort of free. Elastic Beanstalk is kind of not free. But Firebase and Heroku I know are pretty good free solutions, and we'll actually be playing with Firebase today. But yeah, manual hosting is when you deploy all of your code files manually to a hosting machine and you run it there. Now, the second one is Docker hosting. Docker, in case people don't know, Docker is like a sort of like a mini virtual machine. It's generally more reliable and better mimics how your app will run in production compared to manual hosting, because you can actually install Docker on your local computer and run everything as if it's in production on your local computer. And these Docker images or containers or whatever are often way smaller than a real virtual machine. Because virtual machines require things like a guest operating system and things like that, and we'll actually see a quick visualization in the next slide. But it's way smaller than an actual virtual machine, and it's probably the most common deployment method out there in terms of if you have a very mature something called DevOps culture, which is development operations. You will probably be working with Docker in some sort of way, shape, or form. And basically, every single cloud provider out there right now has some sort of solution to support Docker. This includes Kubernetes, Cloud Run, which is a pretty new service from Google, EC2, which is a pretty well-known service from AWS, and Azure, which is the Microsoft version of Google Cloud Platform and AWS. And AWS stands for Amazon Web Services. So going back to kind of the way Docker is visualized, as you can see on the right, a virtual machine takes up so much space on a guest operating system or just on your computer, because it has to download an entirely new operating system, and then all of the apps, and then all of the virtual machines, and it's just so much. It's so heavy. Why do I need to have another operating system when I just want to run my code? The great thing with Docker, as you can see on the left, is that Docker kind of acts as another layer to your host operating system. So you don't have to keep installing these guest operating systems on your machine. They're just all self-contained applications that rest on top of Docker. And just going back again to how great Docker is, you can literally install Docker for pretty much anything you can think of. If you want to get your hands in dirty with how to deploy a Minecraft server on Google Cloud Platform, Azure, AWS, there are actually tons of guides and Docker containers out there so you can do that. If you want to play with a new database like MySQL or MongoDB, and you don't want to actually install it physically on your computer, there are Docker containers for that too. Yeah, I've used it on MySQL on Mac too, and I wish I knew about Docker before I've taken database, because I installed database, the entire MySQL thing, on my Windows machine, and it takes up so much space, and yeah, it's just not fun. But with Docker, you can just kind of say, okay, I'm done with this database, and you can just easily delete it in one command. So even if you don't plan on doing any sort of deployment in the future, like you find that this isn't really your thing, I would still say it's very worthwhile to download, just because you can simply easily install all of these really hard tools that would take up so much space on your computer otherwise, and easily remove them if you need to. Okay, like I said, this was going to be kind of a quick workshop. So I'm going to discuss quickly the structure of the demo application. Essentially what we're going to do for the kind of demo for this workshop is we're going to deploy a very small sample static website. And we're going to go through manual deployment through Firebase. Okay, so manual deployment through Firebase. Why did I choose Firebase for this? Firebase is, again, super, super, super easy to do. And if you want to play with all these other cool features that I mentioned with cloud solutions, like the Google Cloud Platform offers, like Cloud Run, or if you want to play with machine learning or things like that, when you create a Firebase application, it actually creates a GCP project. So you can actually go and play with this if you want to. And it's also easier to install. I personally really love using Node. That's just what I use all the time for my job. So the install for Firebase is super easy. You just have to install Node, and then you install the Firebase CLI via Node. If you want to get more into the Docker side of things, I'm not really going to show you how to deploy something to Docker, like the Docker way to Cloud Run. I do have a sample Docker file on the GitHub, which I will link after I'm done with this presentation, for you guys to kind of see how Docker works, and I can link some resources or whatever. But you'd have to install a little bit more, and it's a little bit harder to set up. You'll have to install Docker first off, which takes a long time, especially if you're on Windows, because I don't know if they've made the process easier since then. You also have to download the Google Cloud SDK, which again requires a little bit of setup, a little bit more than I would have liked, which is why we're doing Firebase. But in case you wanted to know, the reason why I personally wanted to show you Cloud Run was because it's something called it's something brand new in cloud computing called serverless containers. Essentially what serverless is, for people who don't know, is it says, okay, well, you don't need to have an entire VM spin up or whatever. You could just run a simple function in the cloud whenever you want, and then only pay for when it's actually being ran. Cloud Run takes that a little bit of a step further by saying, okay, well, if we can have functions that are serverless, why can't we have, sorry, my Google's listening to me on my tablet. So basically it says that why can't we have serverless containers? Why can't we do the same thing with Docker containers, especially if they're really, really small Docker containers? And it also has a simpler deployment compared to some other solutions that you might see. But yeah, we're not going to go through this. I can show you some examples because I do have a couple of examples up, but we're not going to go through this deployment. It takes too long. Okay, now we're going to move on to the demo. Okay, so just again, real quickly, you will have to have Node installed. If I can access, sorry, the Zoom thing is blocking my toolbar here. You will also have to install Firebase. And you'll know Firebase is installed if you open up your terminal and you run Firebase -- version. Like that. And you know Node will be installed as if you run the same thing, but you type Node first. Okay, so what we're going to do is I'm going to quickly make a new directory. We'll just call it demo. And I'll go into that directory and open up Visual Studio Code. Okay, what we're going to do is we're going to make a simple index.html file. Nothing fancy, no CSS. Who needs CSS, right? Please actually write CSS. Don't make ugly websites. But for the purpose of this, we don't need a lot. There we go. That's our index.html. In case you want to copy that, if I can find it on my toolbar because there's a lot of stuff blocking it, you can actually find it here, and I'm going to post it in chat. If you go to sample, the sample directory, you can see the index.html file I just typed, a Docker file, and then the README for all the commands you need to run in case you need reference to that. Okay, so we have this set up. Next thing we have to do is we have to create a Firebase project. So what you're going to go do is you're going to go to the Firebase console, which again, I'll link in case everyone needs to follow that. And you're going to create a new project. Now, I kind of ran out of my limit. You shouldn't have a problem with this, but I'm just going to use an existing project that I have. And then just go through the steps. I'm not going to enable Google Cloud Analytics, and it's going to create my project. Okay, and it says that it's created. So next thing that you would do is make sure you have your terminal out and you have the Firebase CLI installed. Again, you can check if it's Firebase -- version and something shows up. Then what you'll have to do is you'll have to run Firebase login. And you'll have to go through the login process for that. Now, I'm already logged in, as you can see. So make sure you go through that. I'm going to give like a few more minutes while I read my notes for people to do that if you're following along. Yes, you will have to do this through the terminal. I'm pretty sure there probably is a way to do it through the UI, but the commands are so easy, and I listed them on this README in case you forget them, that it shouldn't be that hard. You could probably do it through the UI, though. I just don't know how to do it through the UI. Am I going too fast? First off. Okay. In that case, then after you successfully log in, yes, that is true. You can. Personally, you probably should get used to it, especially if you're going to be doing a lot of DevOps work in the future, because a lot of DevOps and CI/CD and continuous integration and deployment for when you actually want to deploy things automatically to the cloud, when you push code up to wherever it's stored, generally speaking, it will use a command line or some sort of like command line prompt that you can automate. So it's very helpful if you know the terminal. Okay, but after that, all you have to write is Firebase init, and it'll go through a couple of steps. So what we want, as you can see, there's a lot of things here. What we want is hosting. If you want to play around with like cloud storage, maybe some buzzwords that you've heard before is like S3. Firebase also kind of has a like light version of Google Cloud Platform's storage on Firebase, which I played around with. It's pretty nice. But we only want hosting. And you can create a new project through here, but I find it easier to just go through the UI so you have something to visualize. So we're actually going to use an existing project, and we are going to use whatever one that you made. For me, it's going to be Playground, but for you, it might be something else. And important thing here, you will need to have a public directory. You can't leave this blank. You can't delete it. It could be anything. It could be build. It could be like your build folder or a public folder or whatever you want to call it, but you have to have a folder name here. We're just going to leave it as public. Now, a single page application for people who don't know, if you use a framework such as React or Angular, for instance, when you run the build command for one of those frameworks, it compiles everything down into a single page application. We don't really want that, only because this is a static HTML site. So if we wanted to add more HTML files and link them together, we want to be able to do that easily, because we're not actually going to take all of our HTML and put it into one HTML file, if that makes sense. So we're going to say no for this. But if you're working with React or with Angular, you will want to use this. You will want to enable this. And we're not going to set up automatic builds. We don't want that. Okay, and it says that it was completed. So if we go back to Visual Studio, you can see that it created quite a few things here. The first thing that it created was this Firebase.json. all this does is the Firebase.json and the Firebase source, all that does is it's for Firebase to know where you have to deploy things. And the public directory, as you can see here, is everything that auto-generates. So you could just deploy a sample app if you really want to. But I mean, what's the fun in deploying a already made application? Why not use the beautiful, beautiful website with no CSS that we made? So what we're going to do is we're going to delete this file. And we're going to copy it and paste it into our public directory. Now, essentially, what this public directory is whenever you run the Firebase Deploy command, it'll only look in this public directory for deployment stuff. It won't use anything outside of this. All right, so after we run that, again, make sure all your code is in the public folder or whatever folder that you called it, build or whatever. You can also add multiple directories, so it could be like build, source, whatever. You run Firebase Deploy. As you can see, it's going through the works. And it says it's up. So if we go to this, or wait, it's this one, sorry. If we go to this one, you can see our apps running. If we wanted to add something here, like, I don't know, we'll just do ASDF, because why not? This is in the public directory. If we run Firebase Deploy again, we can see it on, on our actually deployed site. Pretty cool, right? It's a lot easier than a lot of people think, and this is a free resource. A lot of places like Squarespace and stuff, they want you to pay for stuff, and they'll add ads to your website. But I've spun up stuff for like my brother's graduation because my mom wanted a website, and I was like, I can do that for free. You don't have to pay anything. But yeah, that's it for manual deployment. This is only good for front end. So if you have like no database or backend or whatever, if you want, I can give you some resources. But for right now, I'll stop recording, and then we can like talk about other things when I'm not, being recorded.